The rancher had learned to trust silence. Out on the edge of the territory, where the land stretched dry and endless, silence usually meant safety. That morning, however, something broke it. A thin, broken sound drifting up from the creek below his property. It wasn't the wind or an animal. It was crying. Soft, desperate, and human. He took his rifle out of habit, but left it leaning against a fence post as he followed the sound, choosing caution over fear. Near the creek, he found her. A small Apache girl lay half-curled beside the water. Her dress torn, her dark hair tangled with dust. One ankle was twisted badly, swollen enough to explain why she hadn't gone any farther. When she saw him, her eyes widened and she tried to drag herself away, panic overpowering pain for a moment, before she collapsed again. The rancher raised his hands and spoke gently. Though he knew she likely didn't understand his words, he moved slowly, kneeling at a distance first, letting her see he meant no harm. He tore a strip from his shirt and carefully wrapped her ankle, working with the same patience he used on injured livestock, but softer, more human. She whimpered once, then fell silent, watching his face closely as if measuring every breath. When he offered her water, she hesitated, then drank greedily, spilling some down her chin. Hunger and exhaustion had worn her fear thin. Lifting her was a risk, but leaving her was worse. He eased her onto his horse, supporting her leg, and walked them back to the ranch instead of riding, keeping his pace slow so she wouldn't panic. At the house, he cleaned the wound properly, made a rough splint from wooden cloth, and gave her bread and milk. She ate carefully at first, then faster, glancing up at him between bites as though afraid he might vanish. By late afternoon, she had fallen asleep near the hearth. The rancher stepped outside, uneasy. He knew she wouldn't be alone for long. Apache children didn't wander far without someone looking for them. As the sun dipped low, he saw movement on the ridge, figures on horseback, silhouetted against the sky. His chest tightened. He stood his ground, knowing that whatever happened, next would decide whether this day of mercy would cost him everything. The riders reached the ranch just as the last light of day slipped behind the hills. They came in silence, their horses moving with practiced calm, dust rising around their legs like smoke. The rancher stood near the porch, his hands visible, his rifle still resting untouched against the fence. He felt the weight of the moment press against his chest, knowing how easily fear could turn into bloodshed on land like this. One woman rode ahead of the others and dismounted before anyone else moved. She was tall, her posture straight despite the long ride, her expression carved from restraint. This was the mother. She did not rush forward or call out. Instead, she walked toward the house, each step measured, her eyes scanning the ground, the door, and finally the rancher himself. There was no hatred in her gaze, but no trust either. The girl woke when she heard her mother's voice. She ran from the house as fast as her injured ankle allowed, crying out in relief. The mother knelt and gathered her into her arms, listening intently as the child spoke in quick, breathless words. The girl pointed again and again toward the rancher, toward her bandaged leg, toward the bread still clutched in her hand. The woman's face remained still, but her grip tightened slightly as she listened. When the child finished, the mother rose and faced the rancher. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt heavy, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Finally, the woman spoke in broken English. "You helped her?" "Yes," the rancher answered. "She was hurt. I couldn't leave her." The woman studied him closely, her eyes lingering on his face, his hands the house behind him. It was not the look of someone deciding whether to strike, but of someone searching for truth. She turned briefly to the riders behind her and spoke softly in her language. No one moved. She returned her gaze to the rancher, nodded once and said nothing more. Without another word, she lifted her daughter onto a horse and mounted behind her. As the group turned away, the rancher felt an unease settle over him, sharper than fear. Just before disappearing into the gathering dusk, the mother looked back at him. Her eyes held something unexpected, recognition, mixed with sorrow, leaving him with the unsettling sense that this encounter was far from over. The return of the Apache mother came quietly, without the thunder of horses or the sound of shouting that the rancher had braced himself for. He spotted her on the ridge before she reached the gate, riding alone, her figure calm and deliberate against the fading sun. There was no weapon in her hands, no haste in her movements, only a certainty that made him uneasy. He stepped outside, wiping his hands on a cloth, unsure whether to meet her at the gate or keep his distance. The silence between them was thick, filled with the weight of past events he could not fully understand. She stopped a few paces away, allowing her horse to graze lightly while she studied him. Her gaze was steady, almost piercing, and the rancher felt the strange sensation of being measured not for his strength, but for the character behind it. She spoke first, her English broken but deliberate. "Years ago," she said, "a white rancher saved my life in a canyon. He gave me water. He let me go." The rancher's brow furrowed. He could not recall such an event. He had never ventured into that canyon, at least not knowingly, but there was a gravity in her tone that demanded more than doubt. He shook his head slowly, unsure how to respond. She continued, her voice softer but unwavering. "He wore a silver star broken in half." The rancher froze. His father's old sheriff's badge, he remembered it. Vividly, had been broken years before his death. His chest tightened as memories he had buried resurfaced. His father's stories of frontier justice, the ambush, the betrayal. He had never known what became of the woman who had been with his father when the attack came. Only that she disappeared into the hills. "She was killed soon after," she said quietly, "by men from both sides. I never told anyone who he was. I named my daughter after him, in my way." The rancher felt a lump in his throat, realizing that the little girl he had helped was not just any child. She carried a legacy, a memory of his father preserved across decades and miles. He opened his mouth to speak, but found no words adequate for the moment. "You saved her," the mother said, her voice steady and unwavering. "Now our blood remembers its debt." There was no threat in her statement, only acknowledgement, a reckoning of history balanced with gratitude. The rancher understood finally that this was no ordinary visit, no simple repayment. It was a bridge between generations, a recognition of mercy and honor that neither time nor distance could erase. He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the past and the responsibility of the present converge into a single, undeniable truth. The rancher stood frozen, the small bundle at his feet, drawing his attention like a magnet. He had expected anger, perhaps demands, maybe even threats, but not this. The Apache mother's words echoed in his mind. "You are not alone anymore." He bent down slowly, wary but curious, and untied the simple cloth. Inside were dried herbs, carefully wrapped pieces of meat, and the other half of a broken silver star, his father's star. The proof of a story he had only half believed, a story now made, real by the hands of this woman who had once been a stranger, and was now something more profound. She did not speak as he examined the contents. Her eyes held his like a mirror, steady and unyielding. Then finally she spoke again, her voice low and calm, but carrying a weight that made him understand everything at once. "From this day forward your land is watched. No Apache will harm you. No blood will be shed here while my family lives." The rancher's mind raced. He wanted to thank her, to argue, to insist that he had done nothing for such a promise, but the words seemed small and useless in the presence of such deliberate authority. Instead, he simply nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief, respect, and awe. She had given him a gift no coin could buy: trust, protection, and a bridge to a past he had only half remembered. For a moment the wind stirred, rustling the dry grass around them, as if the land itself recognized the unspoken agreement. The mother mounted her horse with a grace that belied her strength and turned her daughters. Gaze back toward the rancher. The child waved timidly, shy but trusting, her dark eyes reflecting the same intelligence and courage her mother carried. The rancher waved in return, feeling an unfamiliar warmth rise in his chest. As the two figures disappeared over the ridge, he looked down at the bundle again. The star rested in his palm, heavy not with metal, but with history, memory, and unspoken promises. He realized that the frontier was not just a place of hardship and fear. It was also a place where deeds mattered, where kindness could echo across time, and where the choices of one person could protect generations to come. That night the rancher sat by his fire, staring at the star and thinking of the mother, the child, and the long journey that had brought them together. He understood now that mercy, honor, and courage were not bound by blood alone. They could travel across years, across cultures, and still change the course of lives. For the first time in a long while, he felt that the land around him was not only quiet but safe, as if the past had finally found its balance, and the future had been entrusted to hands that knew how to guard it.